Alrighty, and now we're actually live, and you probably heard Ocean laughing in the background, and that's okay, because we can't cut that out in post.
He's gonna kill me. He's gonna
Yes.
straight up kill me. And I have my all the things.
And you didn't even silence your phone.
Nope.
This
didn't. This is all right. So
professional production. All right, we're ending the stream, and we're starting again.
Everything needs to start over. Everything is fucked. You said there was a new layout.
There is a new layout. Do you see it?
I see that it looks more sexy.
I like it. Am I in the 4 position there?
You're in the middle position at the doing the things.
Wow, that's
so it's
Happy Thursday, all of you crazy people. Welcome to Hammered Out, and I'm gonna swing this hammer around because that's the thing that I do. And we have.
Where is my hammer? Where is mine?
Where is your hammer?
Aha! There it is.
Suris,
and our special guest
is leaving his hammer behind. He's abandoned everybody. No one cares.
Our special guest today is my hammer.
Is that how we're doing? Okay, cool.
No.
So we're interviewing Suris's hammer for an hour and a half today. That will be eventful. Also, we have here Nick Soutter, who is an author, a philosopher. He's got a weekly show on Stupid Craze channel called Ask a Philosopher. He also shows up on the GDC very often, and we are happy to have him here. So, tell us a little bit about. You said you're an author of 2 books, right? Let's
yes.
Tell us a little bit about those, and tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
All right. Well, I just out of college, a buddy of mine said, well, hey, you're a philosopher. What do you think of Ayn Rand? I said, I know who she is, never read her. Said, read it and tell me why she's wrong. I read it, said, wow, she's wrong, but I don't really understand why, because I agreed with almost everything she wrote, but I still disagreed with what I was reading in Atlas Shrugged. And then I realized I had the answer, but there was no way I could just write it. So I wrote a novel rebuttal, which was could just as easily take place well into the future after Atlas Shrugged. And I wanted to adhere to absolutely all of her principles and still show why it would fail. And so I wrote that novel. Spectacular failure commercially, maybe sold 6,000 copies, but great reviews. Midwest Book Review said it was required reading for anyone who questioned authority in this country, and that should be also required reading for every high school student in this country. Review, just you go to the Amazon page, you'll see it. There's just loads of. So I was psyched about that. My second book was actually I co-wrote the author Confessions of a Sin Eater. It is the memoir of a prison psychologist. He was a psychologist at Walpole Super Maximum Security Prison for 10 years. If you can imagine trying to be a therapist to some of the worst human beings possible. And a therapist has to connect with his client. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do therapy. Your client has to trust you. They have to believe that you see it from their point of view. What happens when you're supposed to be connecting with psychopaths? And I mean, it's truly some of the most brutal human beings on the planet. So that's a difficult book, but that one is out there. And those are the 2 that I wrote. And then let's see, I don't know, past that, I decided I wanted to do. I came up with 2 things I wanted to do. I wanted to do something on the Second Amendment and gun control, and I also wanted to do something on anti-theism. I purchased the domain name theguncontrolcodex.com and theatheistcodex.com on the same day. I was going to build one in 1 month and then the next month build the other. And 2 years later, I still haven't finished the Atheist Codex. It's and the gun control. Sometimes I do profoundly whenever there's a major shooting, I wonder if I picked the right one to start with, because I always do break down arguments. I had what I thought was a novel approach both to anti-theism and to gun control, and it was the anti-theism one I went with. I do a couple rants. I've only done 2 rants, but I did a rant on gun control and I did a rant on Trump, and those are on my channel, and I think those are popular.
Gotta say, rants on Trump do very well. People seem to have issues with Cheetos.
Well, this one I did during the primaries. It was right after he had done. He had said that we should go around killing the enemy, family of terrorists, and I decided I wanted to do a. It was a performance piece. It was the first time doing anything like it. I thought, first of all, I wanted it to be as erudite as possible. So I talked about the history of the Middle East, how and why Trump was starting to get, at the time, it was still the primaries, but why I thought he had a very good shot of at least getting significant support, what in our culture we had done to frame that. But I also thought it should be as profane as possible, because I don't think you can talk about Trump without excessive use of profanity. So I spent like 2 weeks just writing up new swears that nobody had ever thought. Trying to like combine new swears and put it all into this Trump piece. My book still has only about 5,000 shares on Facebook. That piece got 5,000 shares in an hour. The Trump piece. I go off, and it's fun to watch people hearing it for the first time because it's insanity. It's meant to be insanity. So you can go to Nicholas Lamar Soutter, my YouTube channel. It's a named channel, and it's the what is it? The featured piece, but it's just because it's like flag rated R. I don't know why. And then I did another gun rant a couple of years after. People keep saying you should do these rants once a week. Yeah, it takes me a month to do one of those and do it right. But and then the humanist
you definitely want the rant to sound like it's articulate and not just a hot take.
Right.
But, exactly, and it was a lot of takes, and there was also a lot of research. And there was a lot of trying to sort of get down why is it people really were supporting him. In my opinion, it was because the culture was changing too quickly. I mean, even I didn't think Barack Obama that we'd elect a black president in my lifetime. I'm a liberal. It was always the goal, but I was like, I'll be dead before it happens. And all of a sudden we've got one. I was like, now imagine if I'm 30 or 40 years older, how much of a shock that is to the system. And so I go through why I think there have been shocks to the system, and he was a pushback against a world that's changing too quickly for people who really would much rather it stay the same. So, and the fact that he just pisses off liberals, and I think he got a lot of votes from people who just said, I don't care what you're for, but liberals really hate you, so you got my vote.
We gotta vote for Trump to own the libs. We gotta is that that's the kind of thing you're talking about, right? It's like, I hate him, but he owns the libs.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think there was a lot of that too. So,
like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the enemy of my enemy is a Nazi. But my enemy has feelings, therefore it's fine. That's basically what I get from that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, no, and then the codex was what the codex was I wanted it to be a series of arguments, anti-theistic arguments, and I do define theism in a different way than many people.
A little differently than I do, yeah.
Hitchens defined it this way. This is what most people don't know. Hitchens used the same damn definition, which is why I talk to people who sit there and they say, oh, we love Hitchens. I was like, do you realize what he was actually arguing for? Because it's not what you think it was. But I am a huge fan of Hitchens.
Do you think you could define it?
Yes. If you go into a dictionary, the easiest you'll see theism is
enemy has feelings, therefore it's fine. That's basically what I get from that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, no, and then the codex was what the codex was I wanted it to be a series of arguments, anti-theistic arguments, and I do define theism in a different way than many people.
A little differently than I do, yeah.
Hitchens defined it this way. This is what most people don't know. Hitchens used the same damn definition, which is why I talk to people who sit there and they say, oh, we love Hitchens. I was like, do you realize what he was actually arguing for? Because it's not what you think it was. But I am a huge fan of Hitchens.
Do you think you could define it?
Yes. If you go into a dictionary, the easiest you'll see theism is any and all religion. It's any belief in a higher power. Or the second definition is as opposed to deism. And in this version, deism would be any belief in any kind of God. Well, no, let me rephrase that. Sorry. So then theism, in that case, usually means the monotheism, but in my mind, it can mean other things. But in that case, deism is a higher power of some kind. Theism is the belief that A, there's a higher power. B, that higher power knows that you exist, is aware of you, and cares about what you do. And C, empowers you to make decisions for other people or to tell other people how to live their lives. That is the definition that I use.
That C is where a lot of the issue is. Right.
I think it's the entire issue for me. I don't care about the A. The A and B is if that works, awesome. And there are atheists who do care, and they give reasons that I don't think are defensible for why they care. It's the C. The C is the only matter. And by the way, when you start saying that the B is a problem and that you are empowered to stop the B, you're doing exactly what you say they can't do. When you say, "Oh, I think you're not," first A, I think this is an irrational belief, and B, I think you shouldn't hold it, and C, I'm empowered to try to dislodge that from you. You've just done.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Because
you
with just the A and B, it's I disagree with your opinion. As soon as you add in the C, you have not only is it my job to change your mind, but a power higher than both of us has directly instructed me to do so.
Yeah, and if that, and even then, that there can be any number of that powers. I object when you start telling people what to do, and I think there are cases where you have to. Governments tell people what to do, and I think they're right to. But
gotta say that makes sense because Hitchens, one of my favorite moments for Hitchens is when he literally says, I don't have a problem with religion as long as it's willing to have its toys in its own playpen, but the minute it starts telling me that I must play with those toys, that I have to be the one doing, that I have to be the one playing with them, and that I can't play with my own toys, and that it's morally wrong for me to play with my own toys, then I start to have issue. And that's where there's a few other YouTubers who consider themselves anti-theists, and they're anti-theist in like the hardest, strictest sense. And when they ask me what kind of anti-theist I am, I say, well, I'm an anti-theist very much in the way that Hitchens was. I think that religions that try to tell me that I should operate in a certain way, which I find is harmful, almost as if I'm mostly anti-harm, or me and Ocean had a conversation on this where it comes out to anti-exclusionary principles. I think that that's very much the Hitchens approach to anti-theism, and they go, well, that's not anti-theism. I'm like, but isn't Hitchens literally the poster child
Hitchens
for
anti-theist?
I was say, is Hitchens the poster child for anti-theism? Yes. Is he an anti-theist? Yes. Here's how his anti-theism functioned, and it's not unlike how mine functions. But you're not an anti-theist.
Which is why I stopped mentioning that I have two people. I have two pictures on my wall right over there. The first is a signed one from Christopher Hitchens. The second one is from Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Those are two people that I revere for rather different reasons, but I revere nonetheless. And I stopped telling people that I'm a Hitchens fan because it so much time gets wasted on, okay, fine, you understand Hitchens and you go do you, boo-boo. He hated everybody.
It's interesting that those two, because like King was very embroiled in mixing his religion with politics, like very seriously.
He was, except for civil rights. And I got into this with actually a rabbi who blocked me about 2 minutes into my thesis on this one, which was for the most part, if you look at what he did when it came in terms of civil rights, while he did use principles that could be, so you could.
He used a lot of Christian argumentation, like as a basis for what he was saying.
He got most of it. First of all, he got most of it from Gandhi. Second of all, when he referenced it, most of the time, like for a letter from a Birmingham jail, he mentions Jesus 4 times. And each of those times, he's actually not mentioning Jesus to explain why his position is correct. He's explaining it as warrant for his position to be correct, but instead as a metaphor for what he's trying to explain to the other ministers that he's sending this to. But he and I think in part it wasn't because he didn't think necessarily God belonged in this fight, but because he wanted to have as big a tent as possible. So he make Christianity a part of it. If you look at any of his speeches about the civil rights, he almost never mentions God, and when he does, it is a much more deistic kind of sense. And he deliberately.
So how are you defining deism in that sense? Because I know that you want to. We're traveling down a point when you say it's in a deistic sense. I think that you have a different idea of what deism is than what a lot of people usually mean when they're saying, because usually what deism are saying is a God that doesn't interact with the world.
That is true, and that is technically the absolute proper definition of deism. That the God really and may or may not be aware of our existence. Right. And may or may not even be. Well, no, I think
may not care.
Exists, but is. That's true. When I use it in the deism as opposed to theism sense, Suris had mentioned the time when he said that they are not to make me play with the toys. Aren't they going to? You can look that up. That was actually in his Al Sharpton debate. and it's also one of my favorites too when he talks about that. And I think that's a great way to understand his position on theism, or it's not on theism, but on what his objection is to religion. But when he talks about deism as opposed to theism, and I use it this way largely because it's just easiest to put it this way when I'm making the arguments I try to make. But admittedly, then you got to make sure that everyone's on the same page as to terms. So the deistic God,
deistic with respect to law, like not interacting with you on the basis of.
Yeah, so that's the formal definition. And whenever I'm arguing against any sort of like an Aquinas kind of issue, or we're talking prime mover or anything like that, that's what we're talking about. And what I argue is you're basically trying to shoehorn the God of Abraham into from a deistic. You're trying to get a granted deistic. Oh, see, you granted God. No. But it was a slip there, and I try to be a little more careful about it. For convenience, usually what I refer to when I say theistic versus deistic in this sense. The theistic is specifically the one where there is a God that has specific, usually written commandments and injunctions that you are required to follow, which is the B part. And then the C part, that you are also in some way or another empowered to enact. So Judaism is on this scale much closer to deistic. They're still theistic, but they don't. Now, if you go to Israel, things change. In Israel, they do have some significant problems with the oppression of women and following religious rules, but they don't attempt to impose their religion on people outside of that religion. Whether or not you're free to leave or not, depending, is iffy. But they also don't proselytize. And proselytizing, in my mind, is one of the key ways to identify whether you are by that specific model, the theism as opposed to deism, which is how I just use it that way.
This makes me think that theism would be among religions fairly rare in that definition, as far as because it's a lot of. It seems like that. Evangelism is mostly an Abrahamic thing. There's not a whole lot of religions that are focused on proselytizing.
Well, first of all, it's not a requirement. Just in my mind, that's one of the telltale signs. If you see proselytizing, so Judaism is still theistic, but it is as close to deism on this what is it, on the spectrum, as I've set it up here, as you can get, and is why I have the least problem with it. The more it gets about, the more a religion gets about imposing its values or beliefs on others, which Judaism just does not do. The more it stretches into that, the more of a hardcore theistic religion it is. Now,
when you start talking about enforcing those outside of the faith, again, this makes me think that it might be that. I see what you're saying, that Judaism is still theistic because there's that enforcement, and then enforcement on outside of the faith, while rare, that's more of an Abrahamic thing. But given that Judaism would still be theistic, you still might have, say, like modern Hinduism might be an example, where being polytheistic versus theistic doesn't necessarily matter in this definition. It's more of what they're doing with the belief than the belief itself. So, like if you have a Hindu community that is enforcing religious law onto their community, then that would be theistic. If you have a Hindu community that is not doing that, suddenly they're not theistic according to this definition. Am I understanding correctly?
You've got it. If you can leave voluntarily, if it's, yep.
Okay, so then anti-theism is specifically against a very, very specific kind of religious belief.
Yes, it is. And I have this view done out. And the other way I phrase it, and this seems to confuse things more, which is why I like to use it, because, why be clear?
This is what I'll say is that, like, I've had a lot of conversations with anti-theists over the course of my pumping around. You're the only person to actually, besides Suris, I think, and Suris actually explains it a little bit differently than you are, but you're the only person I've bumped into that's actually explained it this succinctly in this way, which is one of the things that I find really interesting, because you're using a very specific definition set. Most of the time when I bump into an anti-theist, they're saying that they're against belief in deity because it's unjustified. And then I actually ran into that today.
And that's usually where you get to have the conversation about, well, do you know how deductive logic works? And nine times out of 10, the answer is no. And then you're just like, how did you come to the conclusion that it's irrational or unjustified when you don't know some of the very basic methods for determining if something's rational? Okay.
Suris, that was a lot of charity. 9 times out of 10, the answer is yes, but the truth is no.
Okay. Look, I do like to apply the principle of charity where I can. Sorry.
So, so when you've been communicating a lot about this, about anti-theism and what, like, your image of it versus other images of it that are more politically common, you might say. And like, so when you bump into an anti-theist that's like, any God belief, no, it's unjustified, I'm against it on political basis, etc. So you're familiar with the argument, you've had conversations with people like this. What is your kind of like response, and what is your opinion on that kind of identity?
It's one of those things I have to play by ear. It depends on the person I'm engaging, and I try to feel them out very rapidly as to A, what their motives are, and B, what's the justification for those motives. There's a set. It's a small set. It's bigger. It's bigger than atheists will tell you. It's significantly smaller than theists will tell you. But there is a set of people who were atheists already, in as much as that, they didn't believe in a God, but they didn't care. Then they saw Christopher Hitchens and said, wait, I can get into fights with people for this? Are you kidding me? And then they go out and that's why they're doing it. And then they come up with post hoc rationalizations for why they're doing it. It's not the majority. It's
is this what I refer to as the atheist sword slinger?
Yes.
Is it? Okay.
Yes. So
yeah.
Between 10 and 20. And 20 and 20%, and I'd like to think it's closer to the 10%, but it's significant enough to be mentioned. If it's one of them, there's very little that I can do that I can think of. If it's somebody who's arguing, it's really different based on one of the things I try to argue sometimes, and often has some effect, is listen, if you really want to deconvert people. Don't you think by taking a bit of a sort of a broader view of this, that you can deconvert more people and have more efficacy of your position, soften it? Don't go after the low-hanging fruit of the deists, of the polytheists, pantheists, and stuff like that. Your real objection is the Abrahamic religions. Why not go after that? And if you object to these others, fine. Deal with them after, you've broken the back of Christianity or whatever it is that you're trying to do. And you just say, well, I'm practicing on this or that. I was like, well, no, you're wasting time on this or that. If you think that you're morally obligated to be an anti-theist and you've got to go after these people, what are you doing? With
so I do have a for that particular type of anti-theism, there's the way in which it manifests actually kind of mirrors something that Ocean talked about on his channel a little bit, which was latent Christianity. So the C portion, which is the portion that a lot of people hold issue with, I've been empowered to instruct others in this or convert others in this, doesn't that particular brand of anti-theism end up manifesting almost identically in practice as the Christianity that, like, Christianity, Islam, most monotheisms? I typically will just go with exclusionary monotheisms. Doesn't it end up just manifesting the same way? It's just it's the same way in practice, and that's one of the problems.
Well, and actually not just in practice, but also in how I got there, which is these sort of dogmatic beliefs. And I had mentioned this because I was on the. We just had this discussion on League of Extraordinary Atheists for Humanism. And one of the points made there was that what ends up happening is they come up with sort of a dogmatic belief, like if we get rid of all religion, all irrationality is going to go out the window, as if religion causes irrationality. I mean, this is. Don't pretend like you don't know. This is the argument. At least 50%.
I know that it. I know that it is because I've heard it. The other way that I've heard that phrased is that all God belief has to go out the window because it's irrational, and all belief influences action, and if your action is based on God belief, then it's going to be overtly negative, or at least net negative. And that's a lot of stuff that I disagree with. Like, I'm sitting here as an anti-theist going, no, that's wrong.
And aren't you committing the exact same irrationality that you're accusing? I mean, if you believe that rationality somehow makes you a superior person, then act like that's a superior person and hold yourself to those standards. They don't like that, and that's actually why,
instead of getting down in the mud and acting the exact same way as the interlocutors you're not a fan of.
The name of my website is the Humanist Codex. If you click on the URL, it's the Atheist Codex. I prefer the name Atheist Codex. I went as the Atheist Codex for 2 years. And what happened was, when I would challenge atheists who were doing these kinds of things, they would get rip shit pissed and say, we're on the same team. I was like, are we? I would like to think so. My team is about trying to do the right thing for the right reasons. What's your team? But when I started identifying as a humanist, I found I got a lot less blowback, and I was listened to a lot more. It wasn't, oh, my own tribe is, and people would sit there and say, you're virtue signaling by attacking your own. Now I go by a humanist, and that's not really how I identify. I think I probably am by most definitions. That's not how I identify, and I do identify as an anti-theist, and I'm proud of it. But, by saying I'm a humanist, by changing the name to the Humanist Codex, oh my God, my life became so much easier, because all of a sudden I could sit there and say, hey, wait a minute, here's where you're screwing up. And one of the other arguments I use a lot, and this one works well, and is one I also frankly believe in, but the truth is, when you take a look at the theist model as I've set it up, most of the more deistic religions, or just the deistic religions in the sense that I've set it up, which would include pantheism, because this is the other way, and we've got a diagram of it on the codex.
Yeah, this was where we had a lot of cross-talking.
Yeah.
When we first bumped into each other, is that, and I think that there's been a couple of reactions in the live chat relating to that, is having the same issue that I had initially. That I think there's a Christian in the chat that's actually saying, like, look, I'm not trying to say that I should enforce my beliefs on others outside of my faith. I'm a Christian, and I'm definitely a theist. Like, they self-identify as a theist, but this is not but you're not using that definition of theist. So there's a cross-talking that's happening between the two of you. And it's a similar cross-talking that you and I had.
Yeah.
Where I think in a discussion that we had, you wound up kind of saying that, like, the polytheists that you've bumped into on Twitter that have been having interactions with you, you've said that some of them, including myself, are some of the strongest anti-theists that you know. However,
Yes.
None of us identify as anti-theists because of this issue.
This sounds very much like the problem with classical theism as well. This sounds very, very much like that, where actually this happened during our first debate, Ocean. This was a thing that happened in our first debate, where a classical theist said polytheists aren't theists, and it was the first time in any conversation that I had a brain fart for more than 5 seconds. I listened to that and just immediately went,
that was on a debate where I was on this person's side too. So there was that was one of the weird things, is that we're having this conversation. She goes, well, polytheism is theism. I'm like, did you just shoot across my bow in the middle of me being on your side?
Yeah, no, I think that's... And please bear in mind as well, Nick and some of the audience may not be aware of this, but this was actually my first debate. This was the first actual, like, structured debate that I had ever been a part of. So just... The first debate I ever went into was utter chaos, non-controlled. I did not get to cut my teeth on anything, as it were. I got to walk into an awkward slaughterhouse. And then of course my second one was against Max on abortion and Roe v. Wade, and that's also not a cutting your teeth debate.
I want to expand on this, because there's a little bit of
where I was headed. This is perfect. Yep.
Is where this a little bit of this cross talking is, because you've mentioned that a lot of polytheists are anti-theists. We don't use the word, but we fit what your definition is. And there's political reasons why I don't use the word. I don't think, because I think that anti-theist gives an implication that I'm against something that I'm not, unless I spend the labor of sitting here and defining it. But there is some talk in the chat of like, hey, no, this is a big redefinition kind of thing that's happening. But when you explained it to me, there seemed to be like there was some history behind the definitions that you're using. So, and that there's different ways of talking about these words. So you talked about, this is actually definition 2 under theism that you're using. This is Hitchens' way of using the phrase. Can you talk a little bit about like the origin of the definitions that you're using? Or
I wish I knew more about the origin. I know a bit about it. So
Okay.
It is how Hitchens used it. And in this definition, in this model, and this model is the only time I've seen this model actively used, it actually does appear to be a more British model. And
Okay.
Cambridge Encyclopedia of Philosophy used to break it down this way, I think 3 or 4 years ago. I don't know if they still do.
Mhm.
Again, even just going to Webster's, you will see both versions. I'm using the number 2 version, but it is there. And it is specifically, but the way they describe it is theism as opposed to deism, and those two models. The way I usually
Right.
describe it, and I've had less luck with this, but this is the way I describe it, is which is a subset of which. Especially if you're trying to make an argument and if you're trying to understand how the beliefs are structured or built. The current and really the classical way of looking at it would be you have theism, which is all religion, and then you would have deism, polytheism, pantheism as subsets of those.
That's
Right.
the way that I
That's
typically.
how a lot of people. Yeah.
That's the way that I would define theism. Is that theism is the. I would say that theism is to me not
The
necessarily
umbrella term of all God belief.
Yeah, not necessarily anything to do with religion, but just simply, do you accept the proposition of God belief as true? If yes, theist.
Right.
So
So then polytheists, Christians, Muslims, everybody is going to be a theist. However, there's the definition they're using is slightly different. So there's a completely different structure that's being discussed here that still has some historical validity, but isn't what a lot of people are intuitively discussing.
It's not the common one used. And then in this one, what you have is you have deism, and deism is any belief in a higher power. Period. Now, here's the interesting part about that. Think about that for a second.
Mhm.
By that model, anybody who is a theist in the previous model is a deist in this one.
Subset of deism, right? Okay.
Yes. So now theism becomes a subset of deism. Deism is a belief in a higher power. Now, if that's all you've got, just a belief in a higher power, you are a deist. If that belief is modified or expanded in any way, you become another subset of that. For example, you might be the theist who believes not only is there that higher power, but that higher power actually engages with you, gives you instructions, so on. So you may be a polytheist. There are multiple higher powers. Yes, I believe in a higher power, but I actually believe in the subset of that, which is multiple higher powers. Pantheist, and then all of those, instead of being a subset of theism, are actually a subset of deism. And then in that model, I have objection to only one. And we have possibly rare exceptions on the others, but for the most part, it's theism. And then now that model does
But your
have
exceptions to the others would be if they're doing what
if they do all three again, the
Right.
preview. And I think that model became untenable for a number of philosophical reasons. And I don't think it takes thinking about it too long before you say, okay, it's interesting and it works, but there are problems with it. But if you're making an argument, it actually works better than the other model, and that's why Hitchens used it.
I can see this being good for making an argument with the justification for anti-theism, that if you're saying I'm anti-theist, this is what I mean. And that definition works better because it's more specific about what you're against in this case. The problem...
Real quick, because the other thing too is it also works in terms of linearly what you have to grant at one point. So Hitchens would grant deism. He could say, I will grant you the first position, which is that there is a higher power, and you still can't get to the second position, which is that higher power specifically knows who you are, who you sleep with, so on and so forth. So if you were arguing against, say, the King
the Kalam leap You're talking like
Yeah.
when people argue for the Kalam and then they have to get to the Christian God. It's that same kind of leap that has to take place. Yeah.
But that leap doesn't make as much sense in the traditional model. But all of a sudden, when you're mapping it out philosophically, all of a sudden your terms match with the argument that's being made.
Right. So I think that my problem with it in this terminology is that when people say anti-theism, and this is what we're seeing when you and I both bump into people that aren't using the definition of theism that you're using when they say anti-theist, that they're just against what you're calling deism. Now, and Suris and I have been talking, and this is like an area of confusion for both me and Suris about how to solve this issue.
We had a 2-hour conversation on this in a Waffle House. Only like all of our conversations happen in Waffle House. If your conversation isn't happening in a Waffle House, you don't live in Georgia. But we were having this conversation about 2 weeks ago, I want to say. I think that's accurate. And throughout the course of this, the term that I came up with, which I haven't coined or anything, and I don't know if it even really works here, but was anti-extrad. I shortened it down because
exclusivity tradition. That was the thing that we've been using. What my issue is, we've talked about like the idea that I was going to jump into it and define it and all that stuff, and I'm on the way to doing that. But I have found that wording a definition for what an exclusivity tradition is incredibly difficult.
But with the ABC setup that Nick has, that C is literally the litmus test for an exclusivity tradition.
I think so. I think that there's elements of that. However, I think that when the exception is that when you're saying that that anti-theists are doing the same thing under that C, it's not granted by a higher power. So there needs to be a way to define what that C is that's going on that doesn't include that in order to really understand what an exclusivity tradition is. Because I think that you can be an atheist and still an exclusivity tradition. So if that makes sense, does that make sense to you guys?
It makes perfect sense, but if you're trying to define this for a broader sense where you could say and talk to an atheist and say, hey, by the way, you're violating your own rules, then you'd have to do that. If you're just doing it to define yourself as an anti-theist who may have some beliefs, it's irrelevant.
Right. No, I would agree with that.
It definitely depends on what your actual plan of attack is. If you're trying to just say, hey, me as an individual, I am this thing, then it works there. I think, though, that there's a little bit more to it than that for when we had our conversation. It wasn't just, here's how you can possibly define one person as an individual. It was the term anti-theist means, because of how Hitchens defined it, it means this. However, the converse problem of that is that we do have these intuitive definitions for theism, which don't work within the framing of how Hitchens performed his anti-theism. So finding a new, instead of trying to, I guess what we're doing is we're playing the same game. We're redefining one word in order to make these models function. The difference here, though, is that what you're doing is keeping the anti-theism word in its entirety, but redefining theism so that the or not you're redefining, but this
using a definition that works.
I'm using a specific definition.
Yeah, yes. The definition of theism you're using allows the current definition of anti-theism to work, whereas what we're doing is saying, or we're trying to do, we haven't done anything yet with this, we just had conversations on it, is taking the exact same approach, but instead taking anti-theism and saying, okay, well, maybe this is the word that needs to be defined, because most of your modern anti-theists are doing the very hard approach where they're not actually doing this the way that someone like Hitchens did. But then you get to do what you do to them, Nick, where you say, well, actually, you're going against how anti-theism is supposed to operate. So what we're trying to do in that conversation is say, okay, well, maybe the issue is that word, because of the way theism is framed, is now an inapt word.
Or not because of the way theism is framed, but because how theism is commonly understood.
Yeah,
it's how it's understood.
Yeah.
Well, I think the couple of one problem is, and I think Ocean's got a good point. When I fail to do this, look, it's got a lot of overhead because I have to start to explain it, and also when I start to explain it, the second I say there are two ways to view this, and that's why I've stopped doing it this way. I said, look it up, Webster's. It's got two definitions. I'm using the second one. And I hate to do that. But that's what I've ended up doing. What I used to do is, look, there are two ways to view it. Theism as a subset of deism, or deism as a subset of theism. I'm using the first one. You're used to the second. That's it. And people will usually sit there and say, okay, you clearly know nothing about philosophy, language, or anti-theism. It's like,
but
so.
But then Hitchens,
and then the most prominent anti-theist of the age disagrees with their definition of anti-theism, which gets us to the conversation that we're currently in.
But I think it's a good moment to try to educate and to try to remind, because this is the thing. However you choose to define them, what I've been calling deists in this set, anyone who is not who includes that C, most of them are allies. There are some who don't care. Most of them are allies. When you take a look at pagans who have been destroyed by Christianity, you don't think that they maybe are an ally if you're an anti-theist by the model that I've been taught. Yeah, and
right, and that's what I've found is that you and I see eye to eye on a lot of things regarding that subject. But go ahead and continue. I'm sorry, I'm just confirming.
No. So because the question had been, how do I deal with these people? And what I try to do is I try to educate, and I try to say, look, first of all, you do have faith-based beliefs. No, I don't. Yes, you do. And if you want, we can get into it. But first of all, you've got those. Second of all, you are alienating people that, at a minimum, even if you want to get rid of all faith and you think you can do it, which is, tilting at windmills, but fine, you're attacking people who would actually much rather be on your side and go after the big fish, the people that, are really, are trying to force creationism in the schools and they're on your side on this. Why make enemies of them?
And when you not only force those polytheists and pagans out of that conversation, you also force Christians out of that conversation who would otherwise be 110% on your side, because there are several Christians who will look at the works of Ken Ham and Kent Hovind and go, no, you guys are not only dangerous to Christianity. I actually just did a video on this recently, a couple of creationists saying that they hold issue with people saying that young earth creationists are damaging Christianity when they are. They say, well, not only are these people damaging from within, these people are damaging from without, because when you have young earth creationists that manage to get political positions, by having these political positions and being able to influence different states, Mike Pence talking in Texas about putting YEK in the Texas schools, you end up. This is not me arguing.
I love that term for it. YEK.
That's the way it should. It should be. It's just I've always said YEC. It's YEK. That's what it is.
But it's not even a hypothetical at that point. It's just going, well, no, this is a thing that happens and has been happening. When you have this incredibly exclusive variant of anti-theism, this is also one of the reasons me and Ocean started thinking that exclusivity is the issue. When you have this very exclusive variant of anti-theism, you exclude people, like Nick said, who could help. And some of these people are Christians as well. Even some of them are evangelical Christians who just look at this and go, I would like everybody to be faith-based so they could get to heaven, but I'm not going to force them. And also, these people are ruining my country.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I completely ignored. But yeah, Christians too. I mean, one of my best friends is a Greek Orthodox minister. An American Baptist minister, a gay American Baptist minister, presided over the wedding, and these are people who are completely on your side on this. So exactly what you just said. They're like, this has to be stopped, and they work from within to stop it. And I'm like,
but they're still theists, though, aren't they? The Christians would be, because they still believe that there's a in the same way that we talked about how Judaism is still theists, that they do believe that there's moral commands from God, and they do believe that they need to obey them, and that churches, even if they aren't interested in getting creationism taught in schools, creationism is a different example, but let's say that let's use gay marriage for an example, because you get some churches that are like, well, we're against gay marriage, but we're against us having them. You can't have a gay marriage and be part of this church, even though we might say that, well, the law of the land is gay marriage, and that's fine. They would still be theists. How does your anti-theism extend to that too? People that are, does that make sense?
It does. It makes perfect sense. And I try to judge people based on, first of all, unless somebody is actively in the process of imposing their beliefs on other people in that C sense, I rarely engage. I don't think that people should be engaged, even the strong anti-theists, the strong theists, explicitly just for the reason of doing it. If they consider themselves to be Christian and they self-identify, listen, I self-identify as an anti-theist, and most people say I'm not. If they self-identify as a Christian, but they are not engaged in those activities, first of all, most Christians would say they're not a Christian. Most people would say they are violating fundamental elements of the Bible. Are they? Aren't they? It's not my job to judge, and I don't really care. What I care about is what they're actually doing. So they may be, are they a Christian? I don't know. I don't know. You get it. You end up with no true Scotsman on that one, and it becomes very difficult. And I have better things to do than to try to parse it out. If they want to be called a Christian, I will happily call them a Christian.
Yeah, it's not. But the question wasn't necessarily like whether or not they're a Christian. It's whether or not the anti-theism that you're using as a label would extend to somebody who's a group that their enforcement on other people is strictly to those that are within their church.
Oh, okay. As long as somebody's willing to leave their church, is free to leave, I would say no, because it is a private organization. If it's a private organization and they want to say no gay marriages in this organization, no gay marriages in the organization, leave.
Suris, you look like you have thoughts.
No, I actually do. I actually don't have thoughts outside of agreement there, because to me,
I think that seems reasonable to me as well. I think that obviously we both have arguments against a religion holding a position of being like no gay marriage. That doesn't necessarily, like, we would have arguments against that, but then when it comes to the religious right to hold that within an organization, as long as people are free to leave peacefully, because you get some situations where it's like you get churches like that are like, no, you can't leave.
Or if you do leave,
line being crossed.
Or if you do leave, there are strict negatives to leaving, like shunning, or there's a pooling of resources that has happened within the church, and you lose access to those resources by no longer being part of that system. We've seen both of those manifest.
Yeah, and that again, the key is you cannot be forcibly imposing those views on others, and by saying somebody cannot leave, you are now violating, that condition. So, you could say, well, they're in the religion, yeah, but if it's not by choice, they're not really in the religion, and the views are being imposed upon them. So. I do object to those. I don't go after, listen, I think homosexuals should have the right to marry. I do not approve of organizations that say they can't. But I don't, if I'm not asked, and if they're not actively imposing those views on anyone, for the most part, it's sort of live and let live. I'm pretty sure they object to a lot of the shit I do, and I don't want them knocking on my door. And once they knock on my door, if they do knock on my door, I have fun when Jehovah's Witnesses. I was prepping for a debate, and I was just like, shit, I need something to warm up. How the fuck do I warm up for this debate? Doorbell rings, and I shit
knock.
It's perfect. There is a God. Let's chat. It was an hour and a half, and then they're like, we've really enjoyed this, but we do need to get going. I was like, what does it take to get Jehovah's Witnesses to run screaming from your door?
I have a story that's similar to that I'll tell you guys. So I was over at a friend's house, and this was a few years ago, and doorbell rang, and it's Jehovah's Witnesses, and the other house was just like, is my buddy's uncle. He was just like, there they are again. There's really no way to get them to not show up. Nick has run away. He's left the building.
No, you see, I want to make it look like you're doing an empty chair interview. This is where you strawman the person while they're gone.
There we go. Nick is okay. Anyway, I have a. Let me tell you about Nick, guys. But no, so I go to the. They said they won't stop coming. We come out. We have like brief conversations, and giggity do. And I was like, let me have a go. and and have a talk with them. So I go out onto the front porch and I talk to them. It's a woman and her daughter, and they, the conversation goes, and I start just going like, oh, well, they start explaining the beliefs to me. I'm like, that's great. I guess since you're here, I can explain a little bit of my beliefs to you. And so we started having that conversation where it's like, I listen to you. Now we can have a little bit of a discussion from my perspective as well. And I started talking to it. And the daughter started asking questions too. And I, was answering them nicely and everything like that. And then all of a sudden, the mother, I think, realized that this was not a good situation as a Jehovah's Witness. And like cut the conversation pretty quickly. It was just like, we're gonna leap by. Haven't been back to the house since. There's been no return.
You're literally repellent. You're Jehovah's Witness.
Jehovah's Witness repellent.
Like
you start getting their kid interested in what you're saying. All of a sudden they're like, no, we can't have that happening. They're going to corrupt their young mind. Fuck right off. We're out of here. So that was that situation.
By the way.
Yeah.
So the Codex, it's still in beta.
Tell us a little bit about that. Like
I will. I want to mention one quick thing about it though. Inspired by a number of polytheist friends, some of whom are in the live chat, but some of whom didn't bother to show up tonight. It's okay, I understand.
It's okay. They love you anyway.
I know we have a polytheist channel now and a polytheist room just for polytheists, and
oh, cool.
They have lock and key, and they can discuss whatever they want to in there. So no, it's originally it was designed really because I'd decided. I wanted to come up with a different approach to arguing anti-theism. I decided I was basically going to go for a sort of try to do absolutely everything I could because I couldn't find a very good theistic argument that was not a reducto to a god of the gaps. Mm-hmm. So start there, build everything on that. So instead of having a couple of different places you could land, just try to say, okay, premise one, God of the gaps is the single most employed and most refuted argument in human history, and then just try to reduce every one of the sort of theistic ones.
That's a more effective line of argumentation, especially when I bump into it. I've seen that being a stronger route.
That's the one. And then, so the way the Codex works, the Codex has two parts to it. The first is just the Codex itself, and that is we got like about 200 or 300 videos. I like to archive videos off of YouTube on the off chance that they go down or something like that. And when we can put them up with copyright, we got most of the Hitchens videos. We've got Christopher Hitchens doing stand-up, which is hilarious. I didn't know he did stand-up. And 15 minutes of stand-up comedy. And he is fucking funny. And he was pissed because he had done it originally with Joe Lieberman, and Joe Lieberman cheated and used flashcards, and you can tell he's still pissed about it. So he's ragging on Joe Lieberman's stand-up being terrible. But so we got these videos, and then what we've got is, okay, if you want to learn, it's an education website, and even the first page just starts about, listen, if this theistic God wasn't true, would you want to know? If the answer is no, God be with you, you need to go somewhere else. If the answer is you'd at least want to know if he wasn't true, let's start to break down from there. And so you can go by theistic apologies, theistic counters to atheism, atheistic arguments, and atheistic counter apologies. And then you can go, if you want to see a particular argument, you can see how it's employed, how it's been used, and just sort of my best take on what the argument is and how it works to all the other arguments. So there's the formal codex, which is just sort of a list of arguments, how it breaks down, and also has resources on a bunch of religious affiliated data. We also had, and most of them have unfortunately moved on to greener pastures, but we had former ministers who had agreed to give out their contact information and who would just, if you were going, because I think leaving theism is a terribly difficult thing to do. And I think there are a lot of atheists who are like, I don't see why it's so hard, man. Anybody can shut the fuck up.
But anybody who thinks that to anybody that thinks that it's easy to basically just change your belief, because that's really what that amounts to, Anybody who is
it's not easy at all.
no, because first and foremost, possibly the most important part of this is establishing that beliefs cannot be changed voluntarily. And anybody that thinks that they can, here's a fun thought experiment. Believe wholeheartedly, for a moment, that Australia does not exist. And if you're not a flat earther, you will find that if you're honest, this is an impossible task.
Okay, that was really easy because I already think that Australia doesn't exist.
That's because you lie to yourself. And remember, everyone, if one God was rational...
me and Godless Strayan get into this argument all the time. I don't think that Australia exists, and she thinks she lives there. I don't know. I don't get it. She's obviously wrong.
Obviously.
Obviously, yeah. Well, it's not just that, though, but it's losing immortality. It's losing immortality. You're asking someone to give up immortality. I'd want to believe that as long as I could. I used to be a Christian. So, I mean, that's a lot to lose. So you have to sort of try to sit there and explain, this is why maybe you should consider at least looking at it, even if it would hurt. But we've got a whole bunch of resources. So we had a bunch of ministers. It's been a while. I was actually sick for 2 years. I was very sick for 2 years. So I was only doing sort of nominal work on it, and the mods and people we had working on it have sort of all drifted away. We still have a couple people who show up, but for the most part. But so we had ministers who had deconverted, who would sit there and say, listen, I'm not a professional, but if you want to talk to someone, here's my Twitter handle. And they were available through the codex to try to make that process as manageable as possible. But we've always had a bit of a social networking aspect to it, but Jim Majors and I were chatting, and he was just like, dude, there's all this stuff you could do with it. So we've made it sort of more available without a paywall for people to have forums, chat rooms, chat. It integrates with Facebook, Twitter. So first of all, you actually have to log in. We have a policy, a privacy policy. We don't share your information with anyone. So we can't do advertising because we'd have to share that you actually visited our site with Google, which we do not do. So we don't share.
You take we don't share information very tip top seriously.
Just in case there is a bishop who says, hey, and he wants to, and his whole life could be ruined if he accidentally wound up on this site. So we take it really friggin' seriously.
Really
Maybe I take it more seriously than I need to, but and we have a privacy policy, and this is what it says. But everybody has to connect with a social network. And the reason is so that if you start to really act up, I know who you are and I can do something about it. And that's, I think, what's kept the peace between a lot of different people. But we have a number of chat rooms for various people. We had the S&M room, which was, I'm sorry, I think I said too much there. We had, I'm just trying to see who's actually listening and who's just droning out, and Nick's bleeding on. No, and so we've got, and then I added up a polytheist room, and we actually already have a couple of people in there. Nobody actually uses all that much. Like I said, it's still in beta, so it still has, but and then I set up based on Suris. I was just like, oh shoot, we need a room for debate prep. So I created my own little debate prep room, and Jim Majors and I can go in, and he can send me files there. We can chat and do all this. So it's actually also a social networking site, but it's social networking and education.
You've also done a little bit of. There's been a few memes that have been created that you share on Twitter that has Humanist Codex down at the bottom. One of them that I thought was really interesting was when you were talking about love the sinner, hate the sin, love the sinner, and then comparing that with certain kinds of atheists. And I thought that was really interesting. Do you want to? I think you're nodding like
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Pissed off a few people or something, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah, that's I get attention with that one. That's one of the ones where, again, when it said the atheist codex and I was dropping it on atheists, they got really pissed. When it says humanist codex, at least we can talk about the issue and not the meme. Yes, it was, the line is something to the effect of, and we've got like 300 memes, and we've got actually, there's a whole catalog of the memes, so you can just go through and look at them. Also, the, what's his name? Does the Pink Heretic keeps all his memes, but he let us keep a copy of them, and we've tagged them all. The evolutionary memes, at any rate. But so this one is, the quote is, "The atheist who says, 'I am only mocking the beliefs and not the believer,' is giving a statement no less vapid and hollow than the Christian who says, 'I only hate the sin and not the sinner.'" Something to that effect.
Right.
I think that actually works fairly well, because there's a fun bit of history for my channel that doesn't mean a whole lot now, because it's a video that I ultimately never ended up making. But one of the earliest video ideas on my channel was the idea was how closely religion is linked to self-identity, and how when you attack a particular belief, you end up attacking that person's identity more often than not, whether or not you think that that's valid. And I'm glad that I never made that video, because if you look at the earliest videos on my channel, I was a little bit more of a shitty edgelord in the first few. So that was probably definitely not the right time for me to be making a video that had those types
You could take
of
it up now,
implications.
though, I think.
I could probably do it now, but I'm glad that Suris of 2017 did not make that.
I was an edgy pagan once, so there's that.
Did you? Well, I mean, remember, your religion has a hammer god, and
That's justified, But
your religion has a hammer god, and the Christianity religion has a guy who got nailed to a cross. So of course you get to be edgy there, right?
yeah. I think one thing that I think that swings into kind of interestingly is there's a huge conversation in the atheist community about mockery and what it is. What are your thoughts on that?
Mockery is extraordinarily helpful. It is great. It is a marvelous tool. I think it absolutely must necessarily be employed against bullies, dictators, and if you're talking about the king of Egypt, you have to mock him. That's the best tool you've got against him. If you've got a bully, the one thing a bully can't withstand is being mocked. It's a great way to deal with trolls. When you're dealing with anybody other than that, it's a great way to entrench people in their beliefs. It's a great way to make them hate you. It's a great way to make people who may be on the fence and watching this say, "What an asshole. Even if I was on the fence, now I'm going to become a Christian just to spite that guy." But everybody decides that, oh, well, I'm being bullied by this Christian, so I'm going to mock them. Mockery is a tool in the arsenal, and it is one that is wielded marvelously by people like Jon Stewart and professional comedians who can take down, significant people who need to get taken down. That's not a tool you use against a woman who, has a family and a couple of kids and is willing to have a conversation with you. That's not a tool you use against even a jerk on Twitter who's giving you a hard time, who you really don't. That's not a tool. I have never met somebody on Twitter other than trolls that mockery is an effective or useful tool for. It does the exact opposite. And I will tell you this, and everybody's had this experience, where you've had a belief and you get 6 people suddenly shit hammering you on it. And you start to think, I may be wrong. But you can't admit it to them. You don't want to show weakness. You're so you double down anyway. Even if you think you're wrong, you double down, you entrench, and now you believe it. You wouldn't give it up just out of either stubborn pride or because you're afraid of what's going to happen to you if you do.
I've had that experience. I try to resist it now, but I like that experience is definitely true. Because I've been in that situation a couple of times.
I've never seen a legit use for it other than trolls, and there are very few trolls. We intuitively try to make people trolls so we can justify doing that, and some people will do it to anybody. A lot of people will do it to anybody. I've been told all the time it's an effective tool of anti-theism. It is not. Period. It is not. Period. I've never seen it an effective tool of anti-theism, except again, unless No, actually, I can't think of an example. I wouldn't use it as anti-theism. I don't think, no.
Because if your attempt, sorry, Ocean, I'm gonna step on this for just a second. So this is a thing that I've noticed here is that what it ultimately does is it doesn't even virtue signal terribly well. What it does is it makes you feel better, because when you mock expressly, if you know that you have the high ground in every way, shape, and form, and it cannot be discussed that you do not have the high ground, then mockery, like you said, is generally okay at that point. Because at that point, to defend against the mockery is to defend, like, say, if I'm mocking a racist, to defend against the mockery of racism.
I was going to bring up the NIFB.
Yeah, it's
because a lot of the strategy with there was mockery, and I think that it was due in that situation. That it was
yes,
the whole pumpkin thing. Yeah. Because we were dealing with, as you said, a bully, but I don't think that that's necessarily a tool of like the way that you're applying it as far as like a tool of anti-theism in regards to like any respectable end. It's not going to do. Like nobody thinks with the whole pumpkin situation. I don't think anybody thought that we were going to give a concise redress of grievances to Pastor Tommy McMurtry and actually convince him that maybe what he was doing was ill thought out. Nobody thought that was going to happen. Everybody knew that we're dealing with a bully. We're dealing with somebody who's just abusing power and playing a game, and that mocking him is in a similar sense that same kind of function that you were talking about with respect to like a dictator or something like that. That is the thing that they can't handle. You're not going to throwing, you're not going to beat Tommy McMurtry with rational argumentation, even though
because they don't play in that arena. They don't play in that arena. They play in the arena. They play in the arena of bullying. So if you're in that arena, then go ahead and get in the mud as long as you're able to do it better than them, which is a quote that I have stolen from Ocean.
Yeah, I've told Suris a couple of times, like two major rules of the internet as far as I play. One is don't get in the mud. The other is if you do get in the mud, be better at it.
I like that one. But I want to seize on one thing you said, because I don't think you meant it this way, but I want to see, because you said, okay, they're not going to argue rationally. Right. And that's not the objection. It's that they're bullying, because the fact is, I've heard that defense a lot of times. Well, they're not going to argue rationally, so I
see what you're saying. Yeah, that's a good point.
Like, no, and that incentivizes giving people the least charitable interpretation of whatever they say, so that you can then deploy whatever it is that you really want to do if you want to be. So you just have to be.
There's a balancing act there.
It's a lot like
if you have somebody who's the bully versus if you just have somebody like an individual, say, that has a stupid opinion.
It's a lot like when an atheist is called. It's a lot like when somebody says an atheist is only an atheist because they hate God. It's an uncharitable read of their position, so that you can say, well, look at this fucker. He's a God hater. Why would we listen to anything that a God hater says?
And then what effect does that have on the atheist? They sit there and say, this is why I hate you, and I'm going to take you down. And now you've just done the exact opposite of your purported goal.
Yeah, you've effectively created a situation where nobody wants to listen to you. Who needs to? The only people who want to listen to you are the people who are in your echo chamber, and the last people you're trying to influence are those in your echo chamber, because they already agree with you.
I've used a term for that, hype atheism. That this is when you get into the kind of stuff that's more geared towards getting the people in your echo chamber excited. It's a conversation that is really like contentious, or that's meant to be kind of gladiatorial. That it's meant for hype. That people will watch it and then they get it gets their blood going, and they're like, yeah, go whoever it is that is beating up the other guy. Even if the conversation is like super disrespectful and all this other shit, and you're dealing with like an honest agent on the other end. That's just, I've been calling that hype atheism, and it's not a term that I pull out very often because I don't see it a whole lot. Because I think that the way for that to be apt is that it needs to be kind of like a very public thing.
Ocean, I think you and I both have a very particular person in mind when we think of. Actually, I'm going to type this person's name to you so that it's not in the seen in the chat.
Wait, do I at least get to see it, or am I going to?
It depends. It depends.
Let me see if I agree with you.
Okay. So when I think hype atheism, or somebody who does this as a performance for hype atheism, this is who I think of. Am I incorrect there? Is that?
Yeah, I would apply that.
He has to think about it.
I would apply that to him. Yeah, I think that's
okay.
apt.
Nick, I will send this to you as well, Nick. But this doesn't extend. This doesn't extend out.
Everybody in the audience is gonna be like, "Who the fuck are they shitting on privately?"
There's a local chat here, but this is
I just sent it. I just sent it. I just sent it in our Twitter chat.
Oh, perfect. I'll catch up on it there. I want to read one of the things.
It's in the local chat now too.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, I got to look at this now before I go anywhere and see what my reaction is going to be. Watch, I've never heard of the guy.
No, you've heard of the guy.
Yeah, I've heard of the guy, and no comment.
And no comment. That's bad.
Everybody in the chat is like, "Who is this? Who?"
So
what we're trying to do. So for one, my channel is not a place for drama. It's just not. So my thing is, I wanted to make sure that I'm at least somewhat.
This is almost worse though.
It's a little worse. However, I do find that when you throw
because everybody's gonna be like, "Who?" There's gonna be like theories and other stuff. It's like you're probably wrong, but it is funny because this individual is that way. But yeah, and I think I've used that term on him before. That individual.
I want to read something. I want to say two things.
Let's change the subject as quickly as possible.
Yeah. I wrote a paper on one of my entitled "Hatred is Fun," and hatred is really cathartic. It is really because you can't hate things that are at your level or higher in your own mind. I mean, they may be, but if you hate something, it's lower than you. That's what if you're a racist. I have to believe it's cathartic because you're sitting there going, I'm so much better than all these other races. And it's really self-aggrandizing. So for the most part, all kinds of hatred is fun. That's why you like getting pissed off when somebody cuts you off in traffic because, listen, I may have embezzled $6 million from my company this day, but at least I'm not that fucking asshole. So, I think we have to guard against wanting to hate the person you're talking to or wanting to make them look stupid. And I think that's where a lot of this comes from it actually is unfortunately cathartic in many cases. If you're aware you're doing it, it might not be cathartic, especially if you're a good person. But if you're not aware you're doing it, you can end up realizing you're hurting someone and you didn't even realize it because it does end up being cathartic. But this is a quote. I'd given this one earlier too. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's an older one. It's a little snobbish, but I do like it. In the way that skepticism is sometimes applied to issues of public concern, there's a tendency to belittle, to condescend, to ignore the fact that, deluded or not, supporters of superstition and pseudoscience are human beings with real feelings who, like the skeptics, are trying to figure out how the world works and what their role in it may be. Their motives are in many cases consonant with science. If their culture has not given them all the tools they need to pursue this great quest, let us temper our criticism with kindness. None of us comes fully equipped. That was Carl Sagan. And Carl Sagan is not necessarily known as the world's greatest anti-theist, but atheists refer to him all the time. And
he wouldn't even refer to himself as an atheist.
No.
Not publicly, anyway. There's stories of him privately going, "Oh, okay."
That's kind of like the Neil deGrasse Tyson thing as well, where by every definition, Neil is most certainly an atheist. However, publicly, he will never call himself an atheist.
Yeah, he calls himself an agnostic publicly.
Yeah. Oh, he did on one. He did actually say it, and I forget it was the Chelsea Nightly or what's her name, Chelsea. I don't know, but
I don't know.
He was on the show. We also have that one on the Codex too, and she got him to say it. He's like, "Listen, if this is going to be your definition, which is basically I think it may have been a lactivist definition. I forget what it was, but it was a pretty decent definition. Goes, if that's going to be your definition, then yes, I'm an atheist." And the crowd goes wild because at least those words fell from his lips. Yeah,
and then his Wikipedia page gets updated, even though he's like because he's told stories before. This is deGrasse Tyson, saying that he's gone to his own Wikipedia page and updated it and said, "No, Neil deGrasse Tyson is an agnostic," and then he'll check it again later, and somebody will have changed it to atheist. So they're correcting him.
So
It comes to-
It's almost like you've got the people who are looking at him and going, okay, look, we don't question you when it comes to topics of science communication.
Talk
because
about a black hole, and I'll
Yeah,
totally
but
on your same page. But don't talk about what you believe, Neil.
and that's one of those things. I think that gets to another conversation. There's a debate that Nick has coming up. Are you okay with us talking about that debate, Nick?
Please.
Okay, so debate. Nick has a debate coming up on Kent Hoven's channel with Kent Hoven, and my initial thing that I just said there. Also, we just got a $2 donation. Ocean participates in the most hype atheism.
Damn you, Wilfred.
But there's a thing that Kent and other creationists do where, when it comes to an issue of like biblical authority, they will be willing to instruct downward and say, no, this is what the Bible says about this, and I am an authority on this, or X is an authority on this. This is what this means. But whenever you're talking about something like science, they go, well, the experts aren't. Somebody's got to stand up to experts. It's just one of my favorite dumb quotes.
Somebody's got to stand up to experts.
That's a real quote. Not from Kent.
Damn it.
That's not a quote from Kent, but that was a quote that happened. I believe it was in Texas, and a politician had said when it came to the issue of teaching what the experts have consensus on, that somebody has to stand up to experts.
It sounds like something that like those climate change deniers would say.
This was a conversation about the education system.
Oh no!
These are the people who are
what?
Here. Hold on.
Who's teaching except the experts?
You realize that
Moses?
You realize that Moses is considered a historical character within the Texas curriculum, right?
Get the fuck out of my house!
I'm not kidding you. He is considered a historical character who had real, tangible, operational effect on the world, leading to present day America.
Oh, I was in a Christian school at one point. It's not Texas. I wasn't in that. So I was on a shoot that we were doing. It was a commercial, and the school we happened to be shooting in a Christian school at that point. I found a textbook, and just for yucks, they already set up the lights and all that crap, and it was just like, oh look, there's a textbook. I'll sit here and open it up and read it, and. I think Moses was mentioned as like something along the lines of a spiritual founder of America.
That's about what they do there. Oh, by the way, the person I was speaking about, his name is Don McLeroy, and this was in a not conversation, but a deliberation about what particular scientific information should be allowed within the Texas state curriculum. And he was the one who famously said, when it came to issues of scientific consensus, someone has to stand up to experts. And this is where we get the obvious divide between a politician and a scientist.
And then immediately after that, somebody asked him about, has he ever heard of Dunning-Kruger? And he said, I know so much more about Dunning-Kruger than you do.
Or you say Dunning-Kruger and they go, actually, yes, I have met him before. I've had dinner with him. He was a great guy.
I had dinner with Dunning-Kruger.
Oh my God.
Do you know about Dunning-Kruger from experience?
Yes, I know about Dunning-Kruger I have a lot of experience with Dunning-Kruger.
I know you do. I know you do.
I have more experience with Dunning-Kruger than you do. I'm
so much experience.
I'm not saying they're wrong. Zatoguro says, can I be my vulgar self again? You can be very vulgar in the chat when it's not a video game stream. Just the video game streams have fewer moderators, and therefore, if you're vulgar in chat, I probably won't see the things you're saying, and that sucks for me, but yeah, you did it, not me.
People are saying that they like me telling you to get the fuck out of my house.
Ocean. You're currently in my house. You're on my channel, but you've been in my house.
Doesn't matter. Get the fuck out of my house. All right, so this is now renaming the channel Ocean Keltoi. I'm taking all of Suris' subscribers. I hope that you guys now enjoy. This channel is going to be about polytheism from now on.
Ocean, I have
Other
a
than that, say what?
Sir?
Yes. Yes.
It actually on a serious topic. Do you need a co-host?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Nick is going to be the co-host on this show further out. This is going to be a lot of fun. Someone's asking, where's the little plush toy version of you? We're going to be releasing that. That's a funny idea. I kind of like the idea.
That's
like the cartoon avatar that making a little plush toy holding a hammer. We have a plush toy that was sent to Suris. But I do not know who made that. There it is.
Oh my God. He needs to say something so that shows up in the.
There is not yet a plush toy of me. Go ahead, Nick.
He needs to make a noise so that gets white boxed, so people can. If he just puts it up there, nobody's going to see it.
No, we see it.
Okay.
It's all.
That's right, because
it's in
not,
a fixed little
right. I'm used to a very different.
the
thing.
Google Hangouts.
Yes, I am.
Everybody sees everything all the time on my streams.
Yep.
All the time. Oh Jesus! So you guys know why I left. Conversation. I wish you. Do you tell any of your guests this, or just do you have cameras set up in my house?
Look, I'm not
saying...
We
have 30 cameras inside of your house.
Is it 30 now?
It's about 30. Yeah.
Okay.
We had to upgrade.
Well,
we found a few blind spots.
Well, this is spectacular. So if we can add that to the people who are watching my channel, I now have 30 people watching my channel.
It's just they're cameras. There's not sentient, but
yeah, but you're watching.
There are people watching this camera. So, yeah, that's true.
Sid with the $10 super chat. Did Ocean say he was shooting in a school?
Yeah,
not the best
that's
choice
the thing.
of words.
Is when you're on a shoot and you're in a school, damn it,
look, it's phrasing.
It's a film shoot.
Look, just because it was a snuff film doesn't make it different. It doesn't change it, Ocean.
Damn it.
The atrocity is still a thing.
I'm going to get banned. I'm going to get banned.
You're not going to get banned. Hey, listen, like you said, it's not your channel. Suris is going to get demonetized.
That's true. There it is. All right, cool. This is the best way. I can say whatever I want, and Suris bears the consequences.
Yep. That's where we are.
That's the nature of YouTube. That's what happened to Skylar Fiction when he had Matt Powell on, lovingly known as Cupcake. Cupcake went on to Skylar Fiction's show, said a whole bunch of shit. Advocating for the execution of gay people and serious arguing that it was constitutional and other bullshit. And Skylar got a strike in a way that he couldn't stream for what was it? How long was it?
It's a 3-month strikes are for 3 months.
Holy smoke!
Right. So Hermit Meta and a lot of other people, including myself, were like retweeting like crazy, just like, dude, YouTube, this is bullshit. That it's not him. Skylar's like one of those people that he exposes beliefs through conversation. He's really good at it. And he happened to be the one that showed a lot of the atheist community who Matt Powell was, just by having like this conversation and getting him to actually say all the things that he believed. And he got, stuck in this. YouTube eventually reversed the decision. I don't know how long it took. I think it was a couple of weeks.
It took a couple of weeks, but by that time, me, Godless Iowan, Hemet Meta, and everybody had made videos on this.
On it, right.
This was the atheist community as a unit had just kind of zeroed in on this one thing.
And polytheists as well. We were all like, no, he should be, Skylar should be able to stream this. It's not him that was saying it. He's actually exposing somebody. So
Holy Kool-Aid's dealing with the same thing right now, actually.
Yeah, I've heard.
Because
what happened?
Because he uploaded NIFB content.
Not just he went to the Make America Straight Again conference to protest, and he had part of his confrontation with Steven Anderson in his video, and through that video he wanted to give context to what some of the things Anderson was saying, which required pulling other videos from the NIFB's backlog that have since been removed from YouTube as hate speech, partly because we've been hammering down on them and making YouTube look at this shit.
Right.
So this is
And for some reason, they haven't gone after my video.
nor mine.
My video's got a lot of they're pretty heinous shit is in my video about them, but
the video.
So if anybody from YouTube is watching, just so you know, these guys have not, for some reason, they haven't gone after my videos.
Right. Yeah. Go. So put a strike on me. No. That's the consistent option.
Strike me, Daddy. I guess that's where we are.
Strike me, Daddy.
But
YouTube.
no, for context, Holy Kool-Aid had to include some of their clips, and in so doing, YouTube flagged them for hate speech. It's the same issue that people are having with when they do videos on stuff like Flat Earth and like anti-vax stuff. People are getting hit. Like this happened. I did a video on Anderson. Me and Aaron did his anti-vax stuff. That video is demonetized, and Manual Review went in and said, "Yeah, no, it's got to stay demonetized because YouTube is apparently taking a strong stance on pseudoscience that's harmful, and when they do so, their algorithm can't tell the difference between debunking and espousing. It just sees that it's there." Also, hi Yumi, welcome to the stream.
Aw. Yumi looks.
You didn't tell me Yumi was going to be here. Did you see what Yumi said in the Twitter stream about me? Either Yumi goes or I go. I'm not going to be on a stream with Yumi. Suris, this is an ambush. This is an ambush, and you know it.
Okay, hold on. There you go.
Oh, I'm about to go. He's about to. Okay, I should have played that card. That was an unwise card to play.
Yumi will listen to me and other humans, but she's having some trouble getting along with the cats right now. Partially because she's had her first heat since being in the house, and because we did take her in as a feral. Heat means attack all of the other animals so that she can get dick.
That's a little bit more than I needed to know about cats, but thank you.
I mean, I guess all animals have to propagate their species in some way. This is just how cats do it.
Yep.
Do we need to have a conversation about how male cat penises have spikes?
So, Nick, there's birds and bees, and what they do together.
Listen, Ocean, everything I've been saying about anti-theism only applies so long as you keep your pagan beliefs to yourself. I don't want to hear about that stuff.
Animals fucking is paganism? I thought that was just environmentalism. Okay. Sure.
I don't know where to go from here.
So, well, I do. Scientist Mel got her stuff demonetized. She did a thing just on gun stats. It was nothing more but gun stats. That was it. What we know about guns, and it got demonetized. And she's had other videos blocked. Shit. And Scientist Mel, find out. She'll give you a list of the shit. That's science education, nothing more, no opinion that gets blocked by YouTube. It is stunning.
Jeez.
I'm surprised my gun rant hasn't gotten.
She got a strike for it though.
I don't know. She didn't get a strike for it. It got demonetized.
Okay. Yeah, and that's been happening to Mr. Atheist as well. Mr. Atheist has been everything that he's uploaded in the past 2 weeks has been demonetized.
And it's not even the.
We lost you, Suris.
Hold on. Can you not? Can you hear me now?
His voice just dropped an octave.
Your voice. You just like grew 7 feet and started smoking cigarettes since childhood.
I'm a sexy beast.
Because Yumi is playing with the chord, my Yeti literally drops me down an octave when she does that. And as you guys can see, she's very enthusiastically playing with this chord.
The cat just turned you into Keith David.
But I was going to say, it's not...
I'm glad that's what happened. I thought that was the cat's voice. I was like, maybe
the cat just went, "Hello, humans. Serve me."
That's a really nice composition with the cat just sitting there.
But the Ocean, at some point I need you to come over here and help me with lighting because I look washed out as fuck.
Yeah, we can figure that out.
But anywho, I was going to say, one of the other issues that we've been dealing with lately, and it's not just the demonetization, there's been more to it than that. One, net subscriber growth has gone down on a lot of Skeptic channels and it's all been happening at the same time. Me and Mr. Atheist compared our stats, and the days where I had my losses in subscribers were the days where he didn't break, like he would barely break 100, which is bad for him. Like, For me, 30 subscribers is bad growth. For him, 100 subscribers is bad growth.
Right.
So the days where I had negative subscribers, which is, obviously bad growth, and they were days. There were days where like a video didn't even happen, so it's not like I could say that, well, I did a thing and people didn't like it.
You didn't like lose people.
It was just that they got dropped out via YouTube's algorithm. The same thing was happening to Jimmy at the exact same time. And he sent me a message after I sent him my concerns, and he said, no, this is happening to me as well. So subscriber growth is down. Viewer growth is stagnating. So it's almost like YouTube is only advertising to the core audience. It's not throwing you in recommendations, which is a thing that's required for growth. And, of course, the demonetization is happening, and demonetized videos don't get publicized out as often as monetized videos because YouTube can't make as much money off the advertising revenue because there isn't any. So it is a threefold problem that is happening here, and it's happening to all of us. Except Ocean, apparently.
Let me ask a legit question.
Sure.
Is it really that they can't monetize it, or that they can't send it to?
Oh, they still put ads on it.
Yeah, they still put ads on it.
Yep.
So
they just steal the money from you.
I think that's what it is, and I think that incentivizes them to say, "Oh, we can't," but they do still advertise it. It maybe it's not the core. If you believe them, it's not the advertisers they most want. But if they're still advertising it, it seems to me they're not being, strictly speaking, honest.
YouTube not being honest about something? That's a hot take, my friend. No, that is a thing that has been happening for a while.
Hold on. I just got an email that's important. YouTube, you've just been demonetized in purpose.
Hi, Yumi. You're very close to the camera now. How are you doing?
YouTube wants content like pop content, music videos, and stuff like that. And
they're slowly turning into a regular cable network. Yeah,
they don't want controversial shit. They don't want political conversation. They don't want spiritual conversation. And it seems that they're slowly but surely eschewing that kind of thing away. So which means channels like this, channels like mine, are ultimately on the block in some way. And that YouTube has been the way that people have been having this conversation for quite some time. But there's been a very sudden drop in a lot of these channels' growths that all happen at the same time, and this is very interesting. So that's
and the worst part about that. The worst part about that, though, is not just that it's happening and established channels are suffering as a result. Because, having this is the first month where I'll actually have, like, a decent revenue from my channel. Every other month has been like, here's your monthly paycheck. It's $500. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'll be able to eat a few packs of ramen off of that after paying bills.
Right.
But the other issue is that YouTube is a platform that has classically been there for independent creators. And when you're an independent creator, there is always at least 1 year, unless you're lucky, where you are going to have to struggle. And you're going to have to actually find an audience and build it from scratch. But if you're a new creator who wants to do content like what me and Ocean do, where you're getting
throttled.
Yeah, and you're getting throttled from day one now, instead of just, oh, you've got 20,000 subscribers, which is usually about what you need to start working like kind of minimum wage-ish on YouTube. Oh, you've got that. Well, we'll throttle you now that you're actually able to at least eat off your channel. Now what they're doing is making it to where up and coming channels can't even get a leg up because the algorithm is throttling them, which sucks. Like algorithm throttling is bad for people like me and Holy Kool-Aid Mr. Atheist. It's worse for new creators who can't even start because of it.
To throw out a couple of names of people that are gonna be dealing with this, we got there's Unholy Sarah, there's God Australian, there's Ex-Cult Baby, and Sassy Atheist are all up and coming, like under 1,000 subscriber YouTubers in the atheosphere that are really good. That you should definitely check out all four of those if you're looking for new content creators that are up and coming that are pretty cool. So would you agree with that, Suris?
I would agree with that, and I think actually we need to have a hammered out with these people at some point as well.
I think so too. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. So if they're listening, this is the olive branch, so to speak.
And yes, Notjaw is pointing out. I was listening to the premiere of this. Is God Australian is now rebranding under Nervadia, which is a interesting name as well. So she's, I think her name on YouTube now is Nervadia, previously God Australian. So and she's making a lot of like science content as well, and she's going to be facing a lot of the same trouble the scientist Mel has. As you put up science content, for some reason it gets demonetized. Go figure.
For reasons we guess, right? YouTube isn't that what we want on this platform, for people to not be able to use?
It's as offensive as Bill Nye the Science Guy, and we can't have that shit. Think of the children.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing: if they give you a reason, then they have to defend that reason,
They have to stand by
if
it.
they're not consistent. So it's just easier to It's oh my god.
It's an awkward situation. It's definitely awkward. It's not the worst situation possible. There are obviously like worse conceivable things that could be happening, like all channels lose monetization, immediately, and now we live in a world where nobody can use YouTube for anything other than milquetoast content that doesn't even give corporations money, so then the platform just dies. Like, this is not the reductio ad absurdum of YouTube. We're not quite there. But it is an awkward situation.
My daughters, at first were like, "Oh, Daddy, you're going on YouTube." I said, "Yeah," and they love YouTube. They watch YouTube all the time, and so they're like, first of all, we're going to be rich. I was like, I don't think that's necessarily true. And then they saw one of my videos. I said, "Daddy, this isn't YouTube." I was like, well, "What do you think is YouTube?" And they go, "Oh," and they take me to a channel of a 12-year-old opening presents, and I go look up, and sure enough, this guy owns $4 million for opening presents on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And I go like, "Oh shit! I'm obviously barking up the wrong tree. We're trying to have, I was like,
I
I
should be doing an unboxing channel.
Wait, so Ocean, you do realize though that you can have an unboxing channel, but it's a channel that discusses philosophy and politics, and it's just opening Pandora's box every episode.
That's what I do.
Or it's a metaphorical box. You can say, okay, we're going to have...
That depends on what you mean by box.
This is what's called... It's what's called expanding your audience, your demographic. You can bring in the kids. You can, start to, talk high-end philosophy while opening presents and or playing Minecraft and Fortnite.
So you mean Destiny's channel?
I haven't seen Destiny's channel, but it sounds like it's
That's
good.
what Destiny does. He does like all this like gaming and shit, and then just talks philosophy and shit.
That's literally that. Like, you're describing Destiny, you're describing Pig Puncher, you're describing Vosh. There are channels.
They're all figuring out that algorithm of like how to be successful in that, and that's interesting that they're kind of playing that game. But it's not edited videos; it's streaming video games and talking shit.
It sounds like I got to subscribe to these. Although a friend of mine, and I forget what the game is. It's one of those Myst-like games, and he gave me a 40% off coupon for it, and said, "Nick, I respect what you have to say when it comes to philosophy and atheism and all this other stuff. But honestly, I would pay any amount to watch you live stream playing this game." And it's one of those puzzle games. Like, I got no idea what it is. I'm not sure if he's actually a friend or if this is a trap.
He just wants to watch you get like really frustrated at the puzzle.
Actually, you know what, Nick? I have a thing.
I just want to see you play Super Meat Boy.
I have a game that Nick should play. It's a free game. You don't even have to spend any money on it. It's available on Steam. It's a dating simulator, and it is called Doki Doki Literature Club. Now, if you, anybody,
I'm unfamiliar and I'm scared.
Anybody who does not know what this is, it is a very, very, like, Google it. It is a very cutesy, very anime dating simulator. But if you look at the tags for the game, when it gives you the genres, one of the genres is psychological horror. And I'm not going to spoil anything for the game at all. I will say, though, that I actually have an episode on my channel that is dedicated to the plot twist in that game, and it was the earliest shit post I ever made.
Well, I'm going to get it. I'm probably going to get it tonight. Hold on. Wait a minute. Yab in the live chat says, Nick, it's a trap. No. No,
Nick,
run.
run away. Don't let your kids watch it. Oh, God.
Run, Nick. Run for your life. Suris is trying to hurt you.
Play it. Play it, yes. Play it, yes. Listen to that person.
This is a game. This is a
I
game.
have to say, I now have some concerns. There are a couple of alarm bells going off.
So here's my suggestion.
This is a friendly audience. These are people who like you.
Yeah, and they are telling you that I'm. So here's what I'm saying. I am saying this. One,
Play it. It's adorable.
play it live. Like play it with an audience watching you, so that we can see your reaction. Two, I would love to see your discussion and analysis that comes from that game, because the discussion that comes from the way that game frames its world is absolutely, like, it is deep and it is engaging, and it's astounding how far people have managed to go with that. And three, recognize that if you walk into it and you do not have a strong stomach, you are walking into a trap. I will tell you that honestly and truly.
That may boost the sub count, or the number of people who are going to view it. So I have a horrible memory for this kind of thing. So like, put it up in Twitter, and I will. Since I already have another game, once I have like a block of streams I've said I'm going to do. I got to do the Hovind debate. Once I'm done with this, like at the start of next month, I'm going to do a couple of these things. Okay, Gaelic Knox says, Nicholas Lamar Soutter, please do not let your children in the room while you play. Thank you for the advice. They've been in the room while I play Witcher. In fact, they helped me with.
How old are they? How old are they?
It depends. If anyone from Child Protective Services is watching, they are 18. They are a little younger. They like Mass Effect 2. We do try to avoid some of the cutscenes, but then they sit in the back of the car and they're like, "Ooh, the car behind us! Let's shoot it! I'm going to get the shotgun. No, it's too far away. You need a sniper rifle." And my wife is sitting there going, "Like, what have you been teaching them?" I was like, "Nothing. They just."
So I will say this: the themes that are explored in Doki Doki Literature Club are things like the effects of suicide.
Oh, cute.
There are also themes explained like what is existence in possibly one of the and also what does it mean to be human, and not in the standard, like, you know, what is humanity, milquetoast sense that you normally get from a lot of media. The way in which this game explores that is very, very unique. I can't really say much more than that.
Don't say more. I will do it. Like I said, I got like 16 people in the live chat, like trying to remind me, because they all now they all want me to play it. They're like, maybe actually this was a good idea. But I have there's certain things.
Agreeing with the troll.
I've got a mind like a sieve for certain kinds of things, and like a steel trap for others, and it's kind of weird the way it works, which is really like I'm terrible with names, and so people always really take it personally. And I used to, like, I would date girls, and then I had techniques, because it would take me like 2 or 3 weeks of dating them before the name stuck. And I would I'd write it down. I'd do this, and there's something, and there's certain
types. Really bad with names then. Okay.
I am. The way I knew my wife might really be the one is, I was at a wedding, and I had uncles who came up to me, and before they got within earshot, she goes, "Okay, his name is this, and his name is." I was just like, "Oh, you get it!" I was like, "You get it!" I was like, "Oh, thank God!" And yet, other things I memorized so well, which is what makes it kind of worse.
Snag that one.
Yeah. And it makes it worse because I'm good with other things, so people think it's deliberate. I was just like, listen, I have tried everything. I mean, I've lost business opportunities. I've gotten a lot of people I really cared about upset with me, and it's just my brain will not hold on to certain facts very well. So
that depends on what you mean by fact. Sorry. That. Peter, I have dealt with a few Petersonites ever since I did my first video on him. Also, Ocean, there's fan art of you in the Discord. It is currently in the stream.
I see the one of me in Australia.
Yeah, it's Australia denialism.
And Australia is sad.
Of course it's sad. You don't think it exists. What do you expect?
So Ix is saying in the chat, what are your thoughts? What is your best summary of your thoughts online about anti-theism?
About lying about it?
Online about it.
Like a resource that you could point to where you've given your thoughts.
Oh, online.
Yeah.
I thought you said lying about it. I was like, is he trolling me?
Lie about it? No.
About it, or I'm like, how do I figure that one? Well, the Humanist Codex. That was sort of one of the reasons.
Let's plug your channel, man, or let's plug the website.
Yeah.
So how do we find that?
www.theatheistcodex.com is the website, or if you just look in the Humanist Codex, just Google that, you'll find it.
Okay.
Any search of my name, it will be in one of the top 2 or 3, things. But that's one of the reasons I did it, was because I wanted a good, honest website that was a good anti-theist website, but one that was more moderate, and it was, was rational about anti-theism and rational about both what's really moral to attempt with it, and also what's practical to expect out of it.
Right. Also, the Atheist Codex has been linked in the description if anybody wants to refresh their page, and I've linked it in the live chat so that anybody can find that resource there as well, depending on what their favorite flavor of clicking is.
And could I get you maybe to link the YouTube channel as well, if not
Easily.
too much?
Yeah, send drop whatever links that you want us to put into the description in the Twitter conversation, and we'll make sure that they're added. And if you want to drop them in the local chat here, I'll put them in the live chat on the channel, just so that we get people sending your way.
Oh, thank you so much.
I was gonna say things, and then my brain just decided to go. So I'm gonna hand it over to you, Suris. Here, have the talking hammer.
Sure, I will take the talking hammer. Where's my hammer? It needs to. Oh, you know what? I got my hammer, but it shrunk over the course of this conversation.
That's
wow. Well, that's the cat's hammer, right?
That happens sometimes.
But
Oh,
that said, I would like to say, first of all, I want to thank Nick for coming and having a chat on our channel. That is, or my channel. Sorry, Ocean.
It's ours. You said it.
Damn it. But no, I definitely want to thank Nick for coming on and having a chat on the channel, as well as thank Nick for willingly walking into what has definitely been labeled to him as a trap live in front of an audience.
well, I don't. I challenge. Experts need to be challenged. So I don't. If they're the experts, I have to challenge them.
Somebody's got to stand up to experts.
To be fair, no, seriously, this has been a delight. So thank you guys so much for having me on. It's been marvelous, and
yeah, this is a really good conversation. We delve into a lot of things that I think come up a lot in the atheist community, that like clarifying a few things that it's a conversation that's had a lot this stuff on anti-theism, and like trying to clear up like what's actually being discussed. And I think it's a really valuable conversation to have.
I think so too, and that's why I try to take every opportunity I can to take. And I think you made some excellent points too. I do try to be difficult There are people who would think that's true too. That was a Freudian slip there. I do try to be cautious of the fact that I'm using some of these terms very differently. There are deliberate reasons why I'm doing it. I'm just not tossing it out. I'm not trying to. But there is overhead in trying to explain that. But nonetheless, I think it's extraordinarily valuable to try to understand what the real goals are, and so any chance I get to broadcast my views on those, I appreciate. So thank you both very much for having me.
Absolutely.
Yep. Well, hopefully everybody who's watching has enjoyed this as well. If not, you've already probably started typing in the live chat or the comment section to let us know exactly how much you hate both of our guts, and that's fine. The feeling's not mutual.
Yes.
Well, no. If listen, guys, if you liked it, please give Suris, a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, please remember this is Ocean's channel, and you can give him a thumbs down.
And with that, happy Thursday. And I'm signing off with hammers and swinging it around, and Suris is not doing that.
I'm doing.
Yeah, there you go. There we go. Hold on. Actually, you know what?
What are you doing, Ocean?
Got a little hammer too.
You have a little hammer too. Oh, hold on.
This is where we're at.
This is where we're at. Oh,
this is doing the
fixed itself.
Oh, it fixed itself. He says
it did. Alrighty. Well, hopefully you guys will go check out the Humanist Codex /Atheist Codex, and it is linked in the description. If you don't do that, then why were you watching this episode? What were you doing?